Hey there, cats and kitties. I'm the Blues Man at sXeblues, and this is going to be a follow-up thoughts and ideas video in the wake of the Doctor Who Series 6 finale, The Wedding of River Song. I posted a brief review where I basically just wanted to give an overview of how I felt after watching the episode, but I really didn't get to delve too deeply on some of the things that we saw, some of the questions that remain, and whereas I used to be able to post reviews, I did them podcast form like this, where I would kind of go in depth to things that I liked about the episode and this, that, and the other thing. I kind of felt like that's been lacking since I've been relegated to only three and a half minutes per a video, so I decided in the wake of watching the episode, some things that I did note, that I thought were of interest, some questions that remain after the fact, and some other theories that are being passed around between fellow YouTubers and Whovians alike that I just wanted to address and talk about a little bit in the wake of the finale. So the first thing I want to bring up is that I really wish I would have mentioned in my video. I thought it was really cool and really touching, and for me, unexpected. There was a scene when the Doctor's calling, looking for help from someone he can trust the most, and he calls presumably Unit and finds out that the Brigadier has passed on. That's Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, as portrayed by Nicholas Courtney. And I never really actually, expected them to sort of incorporate within the world of the show, within the show, that a character had actually legitimately passed away. It was a bit of a surprise, but, it was definitely touching the way Matt Smith carried off his reaction to that. And I think the only thing that would have made it even bigger a tearjerker is if they had done the same for Sarah Jane. So it was just a very touching moment and very brief, and not really to do with the overall arc of the story, except to say that we see just how much trust the Doctor puts in the people he knows, his companions, and I thought that was really cool. Another thing I want to talk about is the endless near death of Rory Williams, but here we have him almost going all badass like Solid Snake or something like that. He even had the, sort of uniform. And, but of course, while he may be ramping up to kick ass, he's still not quite there. He's still a bit slow and needs, the sort of alternate time pocket universe, Amy, which he follows around like a lost duckling, I might add, which is kind of funny. Because, in a sense, that's kind of what their relationship turns out to be in reality. But, I thought it was funny how she needs to be the one to explain things to him. He's not quite following along. And, but it is interesting that her link with the Doctor in this episode, we find that, although we think she's probably crossed to the dark side, so to speak, like Madame Kavarian-esque, no, in fact, she does remember the Doctor. She remembers their adventures. And, that's something akin to what Rose Tyler felt when she, had to leave the Doctor. And again, with Donna Noble, had she not had to be made to forget, she would have carried that with her. And every companion that we've seen the Doctor leave behind, their lives are changed indelibly. And this is a perfect example. Even in an alternate sort of time pocket universe, as I refer to it, they're very much aware of who the Doctor is, and it's only a matter of time before they seek him out and find him. I also thought it was very interesting. There was a bit of dialogue, and I had questioned a couple of my YouTuber friends and Whovians about, because I began to wonder what would happen to Amy and Rory's child. We know that she becomes Mel's Melody Pond and grows up eventually to become River Song. But my question was, well, does that mean she never gets to raise her child? And she actually says this in dialogue between her and Madame Kavarian in a particular scene, I believe, where, she'll never be able to raise her child. She'll only know her as the adult River Song. At least she gets to know her. But I think that kind of answers my question, because a couple of people told me, well, no, we've seen images of her and her baby and this, that, and the other thing. And I think that picture was actually taken just before the baby was taken away from her. Something sort of to leave behind, figuring that the Doctor would want to save the baby, and if he saw how heartbroken Amy was, and, clues like that to lead him to what the ending was of the first half of Series 6, Demon's Run, and so forth. But I think that kind of sort of answers my question that there will be no baby for Amy and Rory. Their child is already, out there as River Song. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll be written differently, if they ever pick up on the lives of Amy and Rory in, follow-up seasons and things like that. But that's just the impression I got on the dialogue, and I put a lot of, notice into the dialogue because I have noticed in the past, even when Russell T Davies was working on the series, there were little nods here and there in dialogue that if you didn't pick up on it, you'd miss out on something, or the answer that you were looking for is right there in front of you, you know what I mean? And I think this was one of those cases where that was pretty much summed up. Again, they could always rewrite it and have it be something different. But another thing that I thought was very funny with, not funny, but astounding in a way, was the way Amy kind of becomes darker in a very River Song-esque way that, when faced with her baby's kidnapper, Madame Kavarian, and she lets Madame Kavarian die, essentially. To me, it was a bit of a surprise, but at the same time, we've kind of seen this thing before. It was like when the 10th Doctor went up against Davros and all of his, children of time came to his rescue, and they were all willing to destroy in order to preserve. And this is something that plagues the Doctor, and I think it goes back to that whole God complex thing, the overall idea of, the Doctor is not a god, but he acts like one. He takes life, he gives it, per his whim or per what he believes the greater good to be. And I think that's, another example of, by Amy doing this, she's very much become a full-on companion. Like she's traveled from being this, novice child to actually reaching her full potential by now. I don't necessarily agree with her killing and sort of bringing herself to the same level, but it's arguable because by the end of the episode she does have the remorse and the regret and the memory of doing so, and she wouldn't have done so in her better judgment. And this obviously was a spin-off Time Pocket universe, as I keep referring to it as, and so, she can be forgiven, essentially. In the same manner, I would say, as the Doctor for killing the Ganger version of Amy, which drew a lot of debate, and people didn't really understand that, unlike the Gangers that actually did become cohesive and grow a sort of soul of their own. This Amy had not. This was very much only an avatar of the real Amy, while, staying connected, and while not connected, it would just be a puddle of goo, essentially. But also we have the one question, the obvious question. I did mention this in my video, and in talking to some people, Matrix Lord 212 as well as Dr. W2, the idea of him being Omega is just one possibility. I am now awakened to the idea that what if he is a sort of offshoot clone of like Rassilon? All the talking about Omega, and of course the Omega symbols, they have led us sort of astray of taking into consideration other potential Time Lords, and both in books as well as alluded to in a couple episodes in the 7th Doctor series, there was this said to be trifecta of, the ultimate Time Lords, one being Omega, one being Rassilon, and one being what is apparently known as the Other, who may or may not turn out to be the Doctor. And this plays into the Doctor Who. Who is the Doctor? What is the Doctor's name? This is the ultimate question, apparently. And while it is some people's opinion that, if this is ever answered, it would ruin the show, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it might, take away some of the mystery and the awe of the Doctor, and that is very important and vital to keep going. But I think you could practically say the Doctor is anyone. They've already said he is Merlin in some, some form of time. And I think you could say the Doctor is anyone. You could say he's anyone good, anyone bad from history. You could give him any name, and they could always play it off like, well, maybe that's the case, but not necessarily. And as long as it's always played like that, it doesn't really matter what the name is. I believe they gave him the name Theta Sigma or something back in the 4th Doctor era. which was his nickname. And of course, it seems like some of his fellow Time Lords know what his name is, so why would it be a problem? I don't think the entire series has to hinge on never knowing who the Doctor is. I think it's definitely a perfect way of, if the series ever did have to come to an end, maybe make that the big reveal. Maybe make that story, where it's carried importantly and things like that. And maybe, in fact, that's where they're going with the 50th anniversary. I don't know. But I don't think if they give a reveal, it will necessarily make it, less fun to watch. Because it doesn't matter who the Doctor is, as long as he remains the Doctor that we know and love. And, there are times when he's tried and put through trials, but he still is the same man at the end of the day. He will still do whatever he believes the greater good to be, and arguably with or without a companion in tow, because sometimes he goes a little too far, as we've seen in the past without one. But that's the Time Lord genes, if you will. And I think at the end of the day, whether we know his name or not, as long as he remains the Doctor in some form, that's what's important. So I don't think that would destroy the series if that ever came out. And I'd be very interested to see where they go with it, should they, explore that avenue. Another point I'd like to mention is the idea of River traveling with the Doctor, because we have this sort of culmination of this series, yet we know that there has to be more to it. She has to know a future incarnation of the Doctor. This has been discussed with fellow Whovians like I Just Subscribed now in some of his very brilliant and theorizing videos, that it just kind of comes off strange that, her story would end now. I don't believe it ends. I believe this is the beginning of a new chapter, essentially. And there has been rumors of the sort of young Melody Pond becoming a companion in the next series. We have yet to see whether that's going to be true, but it should be interesting to see just how far their relationship goes. And then there's the idea of, is this the Doctor's first wife, or is this a second wife? Because obviously he must have been married before to, have the granddaughter Susan, who was all the way back at the beginning of the series. But is this arguably his first wife, a new wife? Are they even really married, being that, as I think I pointed out in my brief review video, that, she kind of sort of exchanged vows with the Tesseract, or whatever it's called. And does that even count? I don't know. Is that a legitimate marriage? But another thing is that toward the end of the episode, we had some dialogue about the 11th fall. And what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that Matt Smith will be leaving by mid to end of Series 7 by the 50th anniversary? Will we in fact see a new Doctor? And if so, who will be portraying this Doctor? It's very interesting. I know it's a long way off, especially with the, pushed back, which is really, really, BS, if you don't mind my saying, to push the series back almost an entire year. We're going to be without Doctor Who, and with some of these questions still lingering, it's a bad move in my opinion. But does that mean he'll leave? I don't know. Maybe. The dialogue, while carrying some weight in some instances, doesn't always hold to be 100% true, as we've seen. And the final thing I have that kind of burdens me a little bit is how exactly is the Doctor's faking his death making everything right again? Just because his enemies will think he's dead, that time does? I don't exactly get that. I think there's a little bit of an idea with the Doreen character saying, there's still this thing yet to come, the fall of the 11th, and so on and so forth. But how exactly does him faking his death? Because he's obviously not dead. Someone's going to figure that out, and shouldn't time be completely screwed up again? Because, he didn't really die, after all. So, for now it seems to be, the culmination of this series, and it was a brilliant series, and definitely left me, hanging in the breeze, wondering what was going to happen, and I was almost completely satisfied, but I just had these lingering questions, and, I hope eventually we will find out what the story is. So, these are just some of the things that I wanted to delve a little deeper into that I didn't get to in my brief review video. Hope you've enjoyed listening to it, and if you have ideas of your own, feel free to comment, send video responses, whatever you prefer. And I hope you're all doing well. So, this is it for me, and I will catch you later. Peace.